As long as you're in place, you can.
I'm going to put that after our public meeting, after our last minutes. Correspondence goes down there. Any other discussion? All in favor? As amended. That brings us to public participation. 1 minute.
Are you guys speaking to the microphone? We can't really hear you.
I have a certain amount of stuff to read, and if I'm not enunciating well enough, I can enunciate better, believe me. As a Board of Education, we have a duty to provide a respectful and equitable public space for all members of our community to share their input with the board. It is my responsibility as chair to facilitate communication between the public and the board within that space. Behaviors such as loud and disruptive clapping, yelling, or incendiary comments that in practice quiet opposing views thwarts the board's duty to provide a respectful and equitable space for public input. Also, comments from the public to other members of the public have no place in the Board of Public Participation. If public participation becomes disrespectful or intimidating, I may be forced to close or limit public participation, and instead ask that remaining comments be sent to the board by other means like email. Now, I'm going to read the standard opening, and then I have just a little bit more given the number of people. Perfect. So during the first public participation, the board welcomes commentary regarding items on the agenda. After being recognized, please state your name and address for the record. We request that speakers be respectful and limit comments to not more than 3 minutes. The Board of Education does not discuss personnel items or student matters in public. During the second public participation, commentary may address the agenda or may introduce issues for the board to consider in the future. The board does not engage in dialogue during either public comment period. If you desire more information or answers to specific questions, please email the board. Now, I wrote something special for just this particular meeting. I hope you enjoy it. I see that there are many people joining this meeting. The board welcomes the comments of all who wish to speak. Since there are so many of you, we request that you try to refrain from repeating what others have said. If you find that others have said something you wished to say but still want to speak, you are still welcome to come forward and voice your support, but please be brief if at all possible. Also, I just want to give you a heads up. If we have a lot of speakers tonight, we will likely be noting only your name, address, topic, and position in our meeting minutes for this meeting. Your full comments will be available on the video accessible through the town website. So I'd like to start this public participation with the members of the public. I'm going to first ask if there's anyone on the phone, 12 or under, who wants to provide a comment to the board. Star 6 if you need to unmute. Hearing none for now. Is there anyone in the on the floor who 12 or under who would like to provide a talk? I'm going to start with the fellow in the back, on second row. Then I'll come to the young lady in the first row. And I'm 60, so please take that into account when I call you a young lady, okay? And so, sir, if you would please write your name and address, and if you wouldn't mind your age, if that's okay with your mom and dad. And that's right beside you. feel comfortable, you're welcome to take your mask off, yes.
State your name, too.
You're good, you're good. You're doing good.
Okay, how about this?
Yeah, there you go. Nobody's coming.
I think you're very, very brave, being a very brave one. If I were your mom, I'd be very proud of you.
I am Kuboy Arjun and I am 9 years old and I'm in 4th grade. I am fighting against the mask mandate. I have asthma and I know what it feels to not be able to breathe. When I wear a mask, I cannot breathe. Sometimes it affects me a lot. I don't get as much air and I do not like it. At gym, it makes it harder to breathe when we are doing physical exercise. And also when we have to go stand in a corner. If we want to take a mask break, we have to go stand in the corner by ourselves. I do not think it is fair that I have to be in a corner by myself to breathe. I also don't like that mask covers facial expressions. It covers him/hers personalities. I'm a happy kid and I smile a lot. It makes me sad that masks cover this. I moved here right before the pandemic hit. It's hard for me to socialize with other kids and get to know them these years. Some adults say that masks don't bother kids. Well, I'm a kid and no one asked me. I don't complain because I'm always taught to follow rules and listen to directions. I am hearing what you said. I am learning from you. When you get older, I am taking care of you. Will you be happy with what you taught me? Please end the mask mandate. Please let us have a choice. Thank you.
Way to go.
Excellent, yes.
Charlie Doyle, 5 Good evening, Dr. Revere and members of the Board of Education. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak here tonight. I've been in the mask for just about 2 years, and it has really affected me and so many other kids. It's difficult to hear my teachers talking, so I do not understand a lot what I'm supposed to be learning. I used to be an excellent student in math, but this year I'm really struggling. I can't see my friends smile anymore, and I really miss that. I think I've been more quiet and less social in school. I can't remember the last time a teacher had asked me how I was. Instead, all I hear is pull your mask. One of my teachers has been disrespectful and told me he was going to kick me out of class if my mask wasn't on. He told me I needed to get lessons on how to wear a mask. I don't understand why I can go to restaurants, movie theaters, indoor water parks, hotels, stores, the mall, plays, and sleepovers without a mask, but yet I still have to wear it to school. I want to feel normal again. I want to see my friends' smiles. I want to see my teacher faces, and I want to be excited for school again. Thank you.
Are there any other 12 or younger who would like to speak? Seeing none, are there any 18 and younger who would like to speak? Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Joseph Crosby and I live at 5 Lynch Walk.
a junior at the high school. While I do agree that masks should become optional one day, I do not believe that day is today. I have to ask the Board of Education what they have done to improve ventilation inside our schools to keep air fresh and clean. Sure, there are new air filters in a few classrooms, but these are quick fixes. The filters need to be replaced, and for it to be effective, it needs to be constantly on in every room, neither of which are happening. I have to ask what the contingency plan is when high school has so many teachers sick that there aren't enough substitutes to fill these vacancies, as we saw last school year. Furthermore, how will absences in class work be carried out while students are out with COVID? According to a CDC study in early 2021, the time it takes to transmit an infectious amount of COVID-19 between two maskless people is just 15 minutes. If the person who isn't vaccinated is just wearing a cloth mask at this time, increases to 20 minutes. When that same person switches to a surgical mask, that time increases to a 30-minute period. If both people in the scenario are wearing a surgical mask, this time increases to an hour. However, this study was conducted for Omicron, which, as we know, is a highly transmissible variant. After Delta wave, people were speaking about lifting mask mandates and cases dropped significantly. Then the Omicron hit, infecting large numbers of people and record highs for vaccinated people of all age groups. Who is to say another variant isn't coming? Without proper ventilation systems to keep a strong circulation and cleansing of air, and without warm weather outside to open the windows to aid air circulation, and without masks, this all sounds all too dangerous and ill-advised. Health and safety of everyone is nonpartisan, especially when people's lives are on the line.
Thank you very much. Any other 18 and younger who would like to address the board? Online, anyone 18 and younger? Again, star 6 if you're muted. Hearing none, public participation is now open to all. We'll start with people on the phone. And to the floor.
Thank you for the opportunity today. It's time to end the mixed messages we have for our children. When we should and should not wear masks, who we can and cannot be around, and why adults can do one thing, but our children must do another. We have given our children the message that it's their responsibility to keep everyone else safe. And that's not a message a 7-year-old should be given, not 2 years later. These past years have changed our children and their childhood memories, all altered by the thought that they need to keep adults safe. Could you imagine that? Carrying the weight that if you don't wear your mask to school, you will make an adult sick. We have set these kids up to carry trauma related to COVID for the rest of their lives. Happy childhoods have been taken from our children through all the in-school COVID safety measures, and it's time for it to end. We've made the right decisions for adults. They can go to football games, parties, any establishment they choose, yet our children are forced to stay in their masks for 8 hours, separated, eating lunch at their desks alone. I know you've seen the photos. How could you not see the hypocrisy and allow this to continue? I've heard from so many parents on the impact masks in schools have had on their children, and here are a few examples of the trauma. Acne and rashes, anxiety around having your mask on, off, and falling down, as we heard, harassment and singling out when masks aren't on properly, sadness, crying, and lack of expression, inability to read social cues, isolation, and lack of connection with friends, lack of progress in speech and language development, panic attacks related to forgetting or misplacing masks, and panicking about not recognizing friends outside of school. Some of these children, including my own, have not known school without masks, distance, and sadness. The other restrictions are also affecting our children, as many eat lunch at their desks or outside in the cold, barely having snack time, have experienced harassment and singling out, have never been on a field trip, had a party or a birthday surprise, experienced learning and development delays, and haven't had the chance to experience school normally. This is their reality, and it's time to move on. Since adults can, why can't they? It's not their job to worry about these things. They need to learn, grow, and develop while the adults take the worry. We can change the outcome by changing course now and making the right decisions for our children, so that our children can have the memories they deserve. My hope is that COVID becomes a moment in time, not something that never ended. I ask that you make your choices tonight with our youngest Newtown residents in your heart and not forget them. Thank you.
For the sake of time, clapping for the young ones, always welcome.
Oh, but I am young.
Very good. Next.
Good evening. My name is Lori Olson. I'm from Buttermilk Ridge in Newtown. While I am a nurse with 10 years of critical care, pediatric critical care experience, today I'm here talking to you as the mother of a kindergartner. To start, I want to go over a document that's on the CDC's website entitled Your Guide to Masks, to review how adults and children should wear and handle their masks. While I'm reading directly from their website, I want you to think about your child and if this is how they wear their mask for 8 to 10 hours at school and on the bus. This is important because the CDC says that masks must be worn correctly and consistently for best protection. Additionally, the WHO says appropriate use, storage, and cleaning are essential to ensure that they are effective and to avoid an increased transmission risk. So to apply your mask, wash your hands and use hand sanitizer before putting on your mask. Do not touch your mask when you're wearing it. Perform hand hygiene if you do. Carefully stretch the ear loops to apply your mask. Handle your mask only by the ear loops. To remove your mask, wash or sanitize your hands before removing. Remove your mask touching only the ear loops. Pull the outside corners together. Be careful not to touch your eyes, nose, or mouth when removing your mask. Wash hands immediately after removing. If you have a disposable mask, throw it away after wearing it once. To store your mask, temporarily remove your mask correctly and wash your hands. Keep it dry in a breathable bag, either paper or mesh, to keep it clean between use. Caring for your mask. Reusable cloth masks should be washed as soon as they become dirty, or at least once a day. If your mask is wet or dirty from sweat or saliva, keep it in a sealed plastic bag until you can wash it. Wash wet or dirty masks as soon as possible to prevent them from becoming moldy. Wet masks can be hard to breathe through and are less effective. Now, does this sound like how your child wears and handles their mask? Does your child perform hand hygiene before and after applying and removing their masks, as well as any time they touch their mask? Do they handle their masks exclusively by the ear loops? The reason being is that the dirtiest part of your mask is actually the outside of it, because it's most likely to be contaminated with virus. I'm also curious if anyone's child here has a paper or a mesh bag to temporarily store their mask during lunch or snack. I know mine does not. Seeing as masks are difficult to breathe through and not as effective when they're wet, who in our schools is monitoring if a child's mask is wet and difficult to breathe through, especially our young children who cannot advocate for themselves? This is precisely why the WHO does not recommend masks for anyone 5 and under. In the 6 to 11 age group, they say that they should only wear masks after considering many factors, one being the child's capacity to comply with appropriate use of masks. I often hear people say nurses and doctors wear masks. Obviously they work. And that's right, we do wear masks. But guess what? We follow the protocol that I listed above to the T when we are in the presence of a potentially infectious patient. So to those in the room tonight who are worried that some children will be unmasked at school, I hope what I share today helps you understand that our children have been unmasked this whole time. They've been wearing nothing more than a facial decoration. The way our kids wear masks is equivalent to putting a child in a car seat, but leaving the straps too loose and leaving their arms out of the shoulder straps. It's been 2 years, and there is yet to be a single randomized controlled trial that demonstrates that masks have a shred of benefit in children. What we do have is study after study now detailing the harms that masks cause. So please let those of us whose children cannot possibly wear a mask properly unmask. Our children have shouldered the burden of relieving the anxiety of adults at the expense of their own well-being for long enough. Thank you.
Next. Yes, sir.
Hi, Kevin Kuzma, 12 The Boulevard. First, I want to say thank you to each of you for being here, Dr. Rodriguez and the board. In my opinion, our governor is a complete coward for placing this decision on a superintendent and a team of volunteers. That is the size of a postage stamp, and he could have very easily made a decision for the entire state. So I just want to say thank you, and we appreciate, not everybody's going to agree with your decision tonight, but we appreciate you putting yourself out there in the time that you The one thing from the beginning of this, probably since about September 2020, that has driven me the most nuts is the fact that I knew around the world, even in our own country, there were kids living completely normal lives, while ours were not. I'll spare you the comparisons to Europe, because for some reason in this country we treat Europe like it's another solar system, like it doesn't exist. So, big question that some people have, big concern that some people have, the people who want masks to remain mandated is, what's going to happen if we remove the masks? What if? Oh my goodness, what if? What is going to happen? And the anxiety is real. It's been stoked in many places, but it is real, and I understand that. These studies are going to continue to come in. They're starting to come in now, and I have 3 studies in particular regarding this topic. All 3 of these studies that I'm going to mention involve counties or school districts that neighbor each other in the United States, where one county had a mask mandate and one county the masks were optional. I'll start with Tennessee. This study was from August of 2021 through January of 2022. Davidson County and Williamson County, neighboring counties near Nashville. Davidson County had a mask mandate. Williamson County was a mask optional district. There was no statistically significant difference in the number of COVID cases. As a matter of fact, Williamson County, where the masks were optional, had a slightly lower COVID case count. North Dakota, similar time frame, September 2021 through January 2022. Fargo School District, mask mandate, versus West Fargo School District, mask optional. Each have about 12,000 students. Fargo, 3.2% overall positivity rate during that time frame with a mask mandate. West Fargo with an mask optional policy, about a 2% positivity rate. Not only similar, the mask optional even slightly lower. Again, not statistically significant. Colorado, the final one I'll mention. Colorado, from October of last year to January of this year. Adams and Arapahoe counties and Douglas County, they split regarding this topic. Adams and Iroquois County had a mask mandate, Douglas County was mask optional. Again, Douglas County with mask optional, slightly lower case rate of COVID over that time period. So those are 3 examples these studies will continue to pour in, and I would hope that Newtown will take this into consideration when we decide whether to make our mask optional. Thank you.
Anyone on the phone would like to speak? Okay, yes, ma'am.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Denise Collins. I'm a doctor of education, and I have submitted my resume to the board. If I can be of help or assistance to any kind of research, I've taught schools from K to 12.
Excuse me for just a second, and what is your address?
Oh, I'm sorry. 12 Apple Blossom Lane, Newtown. Anyway, and I have been an assistant professor and professor at West Point and at St. John's University, which is where I'm a senior fellow. So I just want to know that for you, and if I can be of any help, I would be happy to do.
So have you any comments about the mask versus?
Well, you know, I've heard the parents and their concern, and that's what I always listen to is the parents, but more importantly, the children. If they are having a difficult time in school, being able to be with their friends and to talk to their teachers, I think I would have to go without that because I think we're near the end. Don't quote me on it. Don't just quote me on it. But that's how I really feel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that the people on the phone are having trouble hearing things are muffled, they're hearing maybe everything at work.
Is that with the speakers there or with me?
The message I got was just someone saying that all the sound is fine.
Okay, we're working on that. Is there the next person? Anyone on the phone? Heard other chairs say that you can time going once,
You're speaking in the microphone.
going twice.
Are we still allowed to speak?
You are.
I
It's
can't
hard to
it.
hear. It's very hard to hear back here.
My name is Anthony Newtown, and I just find it odd that nobody mentioned the statistics behind masks. For instance, the size of COVID, the size of masks filter out. COVID particles are around 0.125 microns. N95 can only filter out 0.30. They're only 95% efficient at that size, but are 95% efficient at 0.750 micron. The study in 95 also states that the breakage between the face and the mask, it far exceeds the amount that can be filtered out. That the mask itself can filter out. Basically, these masks do nothing besides cause issues with hearing. There's no hearing impaired assistance. I couldn't hear anything you were saying the entire time, as well as people on the phone. People who read lips can't do so. This is enough. Like, the statistics prove that the kids aren't getting sick. The adults are allowed to get away without wearing masks. What's the point of continuing? You have kids eating outside in frigid temperatures. You have kids not getting mask breaks throughout 8 hours of school. That's abuse. I'm sure you guys get to go sit at your desk, take your masks off, eat your lunch, make a phone call, go to the bathroom without your mask on. These kids are forced 8+ hours throughout the day to work this. And then you want to make them sit outside in the cold? Are you kidding? Would you let your children do that? I don't think so. It's absurd. Whoever does this should be fired. Enough is enough.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes.
Hi, good evening. Sorry, I wasn't planning on speaking today, but the moment just felt right. So, my name is Cynthia Lyons. I'm actually a New Milford resident. My children are enrolled at St. Rose this year, and so I felt like it was fitting to come to this board here because St. Rose is following the guidelines of the Newtown Board of Education. 2 years of school in New Milford was a disaster. 2 years ago, our kids had their year cut short, halfway. My daughter started kindergarten. She's been having a wonderful kindergarten year. We've been very happy with the New Milford Public Schools up until this, last couple of years. Her kindergarten year got cut short, which is like the best year for school. It's when you make all your friends. It's when you really get to like a basis of how your education is going to go, you know. The following year in New Milford, we did hybrid for, I'd say, more than half of the year. Now, my kindergartner is in first grade, seeing half a class twice a week. It was insane to be a parent home with 4 kids. It's insane to be a parent home with 4 kids trying to juggle all these different curriculums, going to school a couple days, going home a couple days. It was just absolutely insane. My child who started middle school went from a phenomenal student to a kid that didn't want to go to school. He cried going to school. I've never seen my son have any kind of emotion at all. He's just not that kid. Cried going to school because there wasn't enough kids. They split the kids into hybrids. So his class had no friends. No friends in lunch, no friends in recess, having to wear masks. It was just chaotic, and I don't think a child needs to have an atmosphere like that. So my husband and I made the decision. We went over our budget. We decided to put them into St. Rose. It just seemed like a good option because I didn't want to deal with what the public schools were going to put this year. So here we are in St. Rose. They're having a wonderful year. We've met a lot of really nice families, but I just think of how much better it could be for them if they could meet friends organically, see their faces, get to know them. I mean, they're starting a new school. I've got 4 kids in a new school, and they haven't really had the opportunity to get to know their friends, these new kids. They're not allowed to see each other's faces throughout the day, except for like a couple quick bites of lunch, which is a very short amount of time. When they were home, before starting St. Rose, I saw my then 4th grader have tremendous anxiety go with at homework and in schoolwork because he didn't get to know his teacher. They were barely in school. When they were in school, his teacher was face covered. They didn't get a good opportunity to get to know each other, build a relationship. Now I have a kindergartner at St. Rose, and I'm just devastated that, you know, she's in kindergarten. First of all, she does exactly what they said with the mask. It's wet all day. She stuffs it in her pocket. Yeah, it's just something to think about. I really think that these kids are really struggling. Their academics are struggling. Their socialization activities, and then they have to put their masks on when they go to school, and it just doesn't make any sense. And I really would like for everybody to think about what we're doing here, and again, like everybody said, it's really in the best interest of the kids to let them have as normal experience at school as absolutely possible. That's what we had when we were kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on the phone who would like to speak?
Yes. Yes, I would.
Yes, please.
I am Galen Revere of 2 Golden Pond Road in Newtown. I will just be brief. I'd like to call in support of universal masking in the schools. So far, we only have 38.2% of school children aged 5 to 11 in Newtown who are fully vaccinated. We only have 69.7% of children aged 12 to 17 fully vaccinated. Both the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC recommend universal masking for all students, teachers, and staff in K through 12 buildings. And also, if somebody is wearing even an N95, but a source who is infectious is not wearing any mask at all, the time to infectious dose is about 2.5 hours. If both individuals were wearing masks, then the time for infectious dose is 25 hours. Universal masking makes a huge difference.
Thank you. Anyone else from the phone who would like to speak? Anyone else from the floor who would like to speak? Yes.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Cox. I live at 18 Mount Depot Road. I was not planning on speaking, but I came here to represent my kids. And I couldn't, in my right mind, leave without speaking up on their behalf. As a parent, I'm an advocate for my children. I have 3 children, 13, 10, and 8. I specifically want to remind everyone that our children go to school to learn. And the example I want to present to you is my 8-year-old son who's in 3rd grade. We get 10-minute parent-teacher conferences. They're typically rushed, the content of which the teachers do their best, but as a parent you tend to feel overwhelmed. How's my kid doing? Where does he stand? Is he progressing? Is he learning? And unfortunately my son was not. However, I spent half of the parent-teacher conference talking about his mask wearing and how he wears it below his nose, and how it's a distraction in class, and how children in his class get concerned, and parents have called the teacher to discuss my son's mask wearing. While I'm looking at his math scores, he's a fairly intelligent child, and I noticed that they're going down. And why aren't we talking about that? That's what my son is in school to do. In 3rd grade, he has to get a baseline knowledge of mathematics, reading, and writing, so that he can progress and be successful in his life. And a positive contribution to our society, which is what I encourage. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I've never spoken up like this before in my life. And we follow the rules and encourage following the rules, and it just gets to a point where sometimes these rules just don't make sense anymore. And it's hard for me to have enforce them on my children when I'm not fully bought in. And I'm not going to go into all the facts and studies that everyone presented here. It was presented very well, but I just want to remind everyone that our kids are here to learn, and the masks are creating a huge distraction, and the pressure of which I don't think we know yet, the weight that we put on these children, especially the young kids. And I just want to end by saying thank you all. I agree with the previous speaker, this is just a huge weight on you, and it shouldn't have been this way. So thank you, and then volunteering.
Speak again. We're going to give them about a minute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Hi, sorry, this is Liza Llewellyn, 32 South Main Street. I can really appreciate everyone's opinion. I know everyone's had one for a very long time. We keep talking about science and DPH and all this stuff, but I think if we're just super transparent and we get down to basics, I think we're a bunch of hypocrites, quite honestly. The same people that are touting for masks and they're concerned about their family members are the very same people that are going to cheerleading competitions and high school activities and all these different things, and you see them in these crowds of people with no masks on. I think at the end of the day, we need to focus on the fact that as parents, after 2 years, we need a choice on whether or not our kids go to school in masks. I have 3 children with IEPs that are lagging so far behind their peers, I'm scared for what their future looks like, and enough is enough. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kristen from Kent Road. I'm a parent here in Newtown to a 2nd grader and a 4th grader at Hill Meadow. I'm also an elementary school teacher, and I teach art in grades K through 5 in New York State. And I just want to say that as an educator and in education, we talk such a big game all the time about social emotional learning. And what I've seen, first of all, I haven't seen some of my students' faces in over 2 years. So my students that are now in, let's say, 2nd grade, I haven't seen their faces ever because kindergarten, 1st grade, now 2nd grade. Sometimes these kids take their masks off for a second, and I realize that I don't even know what they look like. And they cannot communicate through something, especially little kindergartners, 1st graders, anyone in elementary school with any kind of speech or IEP, like we said, or learning disability, We are seeing such a huge increase in anxiety and behavioral issues. Kids are basically climbing up walls, they're stuck inside for recess, they don't take their masks off, as so many other people say, and I just think they are so desperate right now to be seen and be heard, and it is so unfair what we are doing to them, and I honestly have no idea why, so that's all.
Who would like to speak? Okay, to the person with the hand up.
Hello?
Well, we're going to take a young lady who is coming up first, okay? And you'll be next on the phone.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're going to take a young lady who's coming up. How old are you?
Me?
Yes.
I am 10 years old. I'm in 12th grade.
We have a 10-year-old young lady, and then as soon as she's done, I'll call for you, okay? Can you write your name down?
My name is Ashley Johnson. I am 10 years old and in 5th grade. I just want to tell you about my opinion on masks. Well, when I was in kindergarten, my life classes sort of seemed pretty perfect. Seems like 1st grade and 2nd grade and the start of 3rd grade. But then I got to the point for like March 2020 where it started being really bad and heated during school because I really hated school because I was basically on the computer. I basically woke up and there was only one class I was just call. That was the only time I got to see my friends, and that was we never really got to talk to each other. It was only like to school.
Ignore that.
So it was really bad. I had some of my friends' emails, so I got to talk to them, but it just wasn't the same. And then when we got to about 4th grade, we were in person, but we still with parents, but we had to wear masks. And masks sounded like a really cool idea. It's something you wear your face, like it'll stop the spread, but really, they're really a bad thing. Like, they don't even really help work, and like they go kind of hard to breathe in. I've always hated them. People probably get used to, and I shouldn't even have gotten to get used to them. Basically, in my opinion, I think that it should be made a choice if we want to wear masks or not.
Thank you very much. Back to the phone, to the woman who chimed in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, this is Alexa Pignoni-Tilden, and I live at 50 Birchill Road. I'm calling to voice my opinion on the mask. I think this should always be a choice made by parents or our children's doctors and not anyone else. We previously had a medical exemption that was denied by our district nurse, and our providers tried to even come up with alternatives like face shields or placing him in the back with a desk shield, and all of that was also denied. So we had to settle for frequent mask breaks, which sometimes were not even granted. And they also served as no benefit for my son. And if the parent has a right to mask because that's what's best for them, then we should also have the right to unmask and do what's best for us, because too many kids suffered, and I think we are way past our breaking point. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, if anyone has anything that, other than what we've heard thus far, who would like to speak? It's almost an hour, and we have a long meeting ahead of us. But you are welcome if you have something additional to say.
My name is Sarah Clem. I live at 26 Merlin Road. I won't go into how this has affected my daughter, even though it has both as a teacher, I want to come out and say today how difficult it has been teaching kids now. It is my job to get the most accurate reflection of their knowledge and assessment. And I teach, when I part of my day, I do IST and intervention, and where we require as a district around the state to do all these tests. And I can't give my parents the most accurate information when I can't understand what my kids are saying. And that's not fair to them, because as a parent, every teacher who's ever had me knows I question everything. I don't take anything for granted when it comes to my kids' education, and I don't do that for my students. So I should be able to give the most accurate reflection of where they are as learners. And I can't do that if I can't understand them. And they are becoming more withdrawn, because when I have to ask them to repeat themselves 8 times, they think they just got it wrong and they give up. And they shouldn't give up. They should keep trying. And we are taking that away from them because they are less and less and less wanting to participate. So this has got to end. We've got to let them be free and have a normal education and allow us to do our job the way we can. We shouldn't be yelled at because we're trying to take off math to teach phonics or have the kids take them off when they're not supposed to right now. It's hard. And I thought as a teacher I should come up here because we need to know that. It is hard to do our job being math and having the kids math. So I just ask you to please make it a choice. As a teacher, I will respect that parent's decision, but as a parent, at the end of the day, it is our right. Thank you.
Any others who have something to add to the conversation? On the phone? On the floor?
Yes, hi, I'm calling in.
1 minute, please. We have a person ahead of you. We'll be there in 3 minutes.
I'll be very brief. First, I too would like to commend.
Name and address, please.
Oh, sure. Bonnie Early, 32 Pine Tree Hill Road. I'd just like to, again, commend you all for your hard work and concern and efforts over the last 2 years. I know it's difficult, and I know that it's, I hope you can understand that we truly appreciate all your efforts. I just would like to just not so much really reiterate, but just to bring up another discussion about the children. Children have spent obviously over 2 years recovering from their faces. They're participating in athletics with masks strapped over their noses and mouths. And they're unable to see each other's faces. They're unable to see the faces of their teachers. They're breathing in dangerous amounts of carbon dioxide. There are reports of collapse, lightheadedness. I've seen it all too many times at sporting events. Fatigue and anxiety. We are on the wrong side of history, requiring children to live in masks while claiming they are resilient. It's inhumane. I implore you to make it mask optional. Those that would like to wear them should. Those that would like not to wear them, as most adults have not been wearing them, I'd like these children to have an option. I implore you to be the voices of these children. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, please.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Yes, hi, thank you. Good evening. I'm a resident and a parent of 2 children, and I'm here this evening to address the mask.
Name and address, please.
We are now...
Name and address,
I'm
please.
sorry?
Name and address, please.
Lee Crutchfield, 12 Taunton Lane. I'm a parent of 2 children. I'm here this evening to address masks. We are now in seventh extension of emergency powers manipulated by Governor Lamont, which you are aware are to extend the mask mandate for our children in schools until at least February 28th, at which time the decision on how the mandates proceed will be determined by our local officials. I want to bluntly express how sickening and infuriating it is to continue on with masking our children and students in schools. There is only one emergency and crisis in Connecticut on our hands right now, and that is our children are forced to strap moist, bacteria, dirty cloths over their mouths and noses. I want to point out a very important and concerning point about masks. Not only have we been hearing and witnessing the psychological impact on the health of our students from being forced to wear the mask, but there's a perspective that's being failed to be addressed, or perhaps it's being dismissed. But that is simply the fact that these facial coverings are being manufactured with potentially damaging materials and fibers. Has anyone stopped to ask what the long-term result from covering the mouth and now inhaling the fibers and or pollutants contained on other materials, which could be pollutants, toxins, formaldehyde, chemicals? I want to read a quote from an article. This is a Swanson University study, and the Swanson University scientists have uncovered potentially dangerous chemical pollutants that are released from disposable face masks when submerged in water. The research revealed high levels of pollutants, including lead, antimony, and copper, within the silicone-based and plastic fibers of common disposable face masks. There's another article. If you give me a minute, I'm going to pull it up. And this, the heading is COVID-19 face masks could cause lung problems. Chinese study. And it says, wearing a face mask could cause lung problems due to the inhalation of plastic fibers, a new study has found. But the potential health risks of COVID masks are outweighed by their benefits. Is a minor problem compared with protecting humans from COVID-19, said the Chinese research team from Wuhan, the city where the coronavirus is believed to have originated. In the peer-reviewed paper published in the Journal of Hazardous Materials earlier this week, a wide range of masks were tested for plastic fibers. While these latest studies offer food for thought, the one clear takeaway remains that masks are the most cost-effective way to fight the virus. A recent German study found masks help reduce the number of new COVID-19 infections in the country by 47%. The South China Morning Post reported last month. The best performing, and it just goes on about different various masks, but then they continue on, and they were saying that they found the masks containing activated carbon produce the highest number of fibers at nearly 4,000. Some of the fibers were several millimeters long, considerably longer than typical particles floating in the air.
Okay, it's been 3
The
minutes.
health side
Are you
effects
closing?
caused by broken off fibers were unclear. So I don't want to keep going reading the whole thing, but basically, I just want to ask you this, why is this not being addressed or voiced? This is absolutely disturbing that this isn't being emphasized. It should concern everyone. What's being stressed for our child's face for 8+ hours a day? And a year from now, 2 years, 3, 5, 10 years from now, what's the possible health crisis could we be potentially facing? What will we have in our hands?
Thank
The
you.
long-term inhalation of these fibers that are leading with chemicals, toxins, dyes, formaldehyde.
Thank you very much.
Where there's risk, there must be choice as parents. The health of our children must be the right of the parents.
Thank
Thank you.
Any other people who have something other than what has been said so far that would like to speak? And on the phone too, I guess another one come, please.
My name is Stephanie. Hi. I live at 40 Blackbridge Road.
1 minute, we'll get back to the person on the phone in about 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Sure, go ahead.
Hi, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can now, yes.
you guys are going to be here for a very long time talking about the mask. But I don't believe that COVID is a emergency any longer, and I think we need to treat it as such and give parents the choice. The only emergency that Connecticut is experiencing right now is a pediatric mental health crisis, and that just needs to be known. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ma'am.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I missed out on anything else of what I'm about to say. I understand that we've been through a very long road with this, and I don't feel that it's fair anymore for our children to have to wear masks. I believe it's parental choice at this point. The question is, where do we draw the line? And I feel like this is a good time to start drawing the line. It's being indicated at the state level. It's now being kicked down to the local level, like a hot potato for us to have to do. I feel for the kids in this whole situation that they've had to give up a lot. I don't feel that they have been thanked. I don't feel that they've been acknowledged. I feel that the masks have been sort of a point of contention at school due to just wear your mask, put your mask on, do your mask, whatever kind of static comes with the mask and the anxiety that comes with the mask. At this point, there are plenty of people who are vaccinated. There are people who are choosing not to be vaccinated. But at this point, I feel like our children have given so much to this cause, and it's time for them to be treated like humans. And I cannot imagine how they must feel thinking that their adults aren't sticking up for them. And that's why I'm here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Is someone who would like to speak?
No.
Hello? Yes, sir. Would you like to speak?
Yes, she was like, yo, that's right.
You may want to put yourself on mute unless you want about 100 people to hear you. Is there anyone else on the phone who would like to speak about something that we have not yet heard, preferably? Anyone on the floor? Okay, I now declare public participation for the first time around closed. So moving on to the chair's report. Okay, for today's meeting, I'm going to try and keep it short. The most urgent item to share is that the Charter Revision Commission is considering increasing the Board of Education membership to 8 members, which is of which no more than 4 can be from the same party. The implications of this are, first, doing so would ensure that at least 1 member from another party would have to join for a vote to pass, provided that all members are present. Second, there would likely be no contest at the polls, as the parties tend to support only the number of candidates that have a chance to win, and people tend not to run if they do not have party support. So if you have opinions about changing the membership of the party, the Charter Revision Commission is tomorrow, so you may want to email them. That ends my report. It's on the town website. They have their, it's just like the Board of Ed, they're on their proper commission. Dr. Rodriguez?
Well, good evening. As you know, we presented our budget to the Board of Finance last Thursday evening, and we're awaiting further questions from that board, as we do every year. I already have scheduled meetings with various PTA groups and will be meeting with them to not only discuss the details of the budget, but to answer any questions for our operational plan for the 2022-23 budget. Our peak budget committee, of which Tanya is a part, is working on their trifold as they have in the past, and that will outline some basic information about the budget and the budget process. However, they do have plans to continue also to ensure appropriate information about the budget gets to the public. And as you know, we moved from the Board of Finance to the Legislative Council. We will also be sharing information with our administrators and staff as we continue to coordinate plans for Holly next year. On Friday, we will be discussing those details with our leadership team, and I know that Chris Moretti, the principal of Holly, and principals of Sandy Hook and Reed will follow with faculty meetings to talk about the plan with their staff, and we will update you at a future meeting as well. And that's all I have this evening.
Thank you. Are there committee reports? Mr. Cruzon.
Policy committee met last Wednesday. In addition to there are 3 policies on tonight's agenda, one of which is security and reference checks came through our committee, came through last week, and we reviewed it before sending it up. We also passed along to come to the board as soon as possible a policy about equal employment opportunity, one about plans for minority recruitment and selection, one on personnel records, and one on nepotism. All of these were ones that have been sitting in the queue for a little while. The policy committee reviewed them prior to agreeing to send them back to the board, so they should be coming to a board meeting in the very near future.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Ms. Kuzma.
The Social, Emotional Health and Wellness Committee met for the first time on January 28th. We reviewed the description and purpose of the committee and all agreed with the original plan. And during the meeting, we established some goals that we would like to see in 2022. And as mentioned in Dr. Recker's report a few weeks ago, about we discussed the 2 mental health days. We did agree as a team that when the health and wellness coordinator is hired, that we would like to have her be an active member of this committee. And we decided we're going to be meeting on the 4th Friday of each month.
Thank you. Ms. Larkin.
Hi, with John's absence, I was going to report out on the curriculum committee that met this past week. And we had the absolute pleasure of hearing about having the high school economics curriculum presented to us. And it was really nicely done. I think Don and I wanted to sign up, and I think we expressed that in the meeting. It's really great to see, those types of classes are available at high school, that talk about the fundamentals of economics and supply and demand and so on and so forth. We also had the pleasure of world religions being presented to us, and his name was Mark. I don't remember his last name. I had a friend somewhere. But man, if this guy can't convince you to take his class, nobody's going to. He was like top notch. Really great content too. Another class I would have signed up for if I were going back to high school. So it was great, and we look forward to having those fully presented at the board.
Thank you very much. Any other committee reports? Mr. Ramsey.
Thank you. And on the 7th of February, we had a communication subcommittee meeting, and Ms. Larkin and Mr. Cruzon, Dr. Rodriguez, give us a nice overview of the district website. And so we took a look at it for aesthetics and, you know, user-friendly ease of use. And so we got great feedback and then even made a couple of modifications on the same day. At the same meeting, we had a discussion about, you know, trying different formats for our newsletter. You know, make it, you know, trying new things with aesthetics. And we also discussed content and to have a kind of a budgetary emphasis and then, you know, to explore ways where we could highlight different schools with different programs. So we really had a great meeting. Thank you.
Any other committees? Seeing none, welcome back, and we can pass the mic down to you. Our student report. And speak right into that.
Good evening, everyone. I have some wonderful updates for you tonight. The charge club is starting on February 17th and will continue every Thursday after. No experience is required. Last week was National School Counseling Week, and students stopped by to thank their counselors for all that they do. Congratulations to the NHS dance team, who won first place in both the jazz and hip-hop competitions at the Southwest Conference Championships. Also, congratulations to the girls indoor track team, who also won the Southwest Conference Championship. The wrestling team, gymnastics team, and cheer team all came in second place at their Southwest Conference Championships. The Nighthawks hockey participated in Warrior Cup 2022 and helped raise over $1,000 for the Wounded Warriors Project. Future Teachers of America Club is starting meetings every first and third Thursday of every month. The check-in fair was held on January 28th, and students went to different booths for mental health and won prizes. Girls Inspired Girls is hosting a drive to collect pads and tampons to put in the girls' bathrooms. The week before check-in fair was Hope Week, where Hope Squad members spread messages of hope and kindness. This Friday, we will be having a blue and gold day before the February break to boost school spirit. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. That was a well-rounded report. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Now we have action on financial report month ending January 31st, 2020. Do we have a motion for the report?
Move that the Board of Education approve the financial report for the month ending January 31st, 2022.
Second.
Mr. Larkin moves, Mr. Cruzon seconds. Ms. Vaughn.
So in your packets tonight, you will find the 7th report of 21-22 fiscal year.
Go right up to it.
This report shows a reduction in the prior month, over the prior month, $51,751 with a new year-end projected balance of $129,795. There really wasn't too much movement over the month. We only had two major objects that experienced some movement that are worth noting, and that was found in salaries and other purchase services. In our certified salary account, we included $65,000 in encumbrance to account for the curriculum writing that will take place at year-end. This account does go slightly in the negative, however, it's offset by a positive balance that's now showing in our teacher salary account. And in non-certified, we're still experiencing unfilled positions, which continues to drive a positive position in this area. We currently have about 8 or 9 para positions open, 3 BTs, and 1 network specialist. We have adjusted all of these line items, and we do have an anticipation that they will begin, say, around March, so we encumber or I put those in my anticipated obligations. In other purchase services, we have accounted for the anticipated receipt of the state's excess cost grant, which came in at 81.98%, which is much higher than I've ever seen. This yields an additional $116,683 in revenue. 88% of this will be applied to the tuition account, and about 20% will be applied to transportation. However, to offset this revenue, of course, we have 4 potential additional outplacements. I've included the prorated dollar amount of about $120,000 to capture these potential costs. The special education out-of-district tuition negative balance of just over $167,000. And next month, I'll most likely be including a transfer request to move special contingency account to cover that line item. But as of now, all the other accounts at our special education department are in positive positions. And other than that, it's really been business as usual and not too much to report for January. I did want to pass out, right now we're working on our RFP for the food service. I just want to pass out an activity calendar to take a look at. And I highlighted some important dates that the board would be very interested in. There's a couple of things that we have to do. So right now, my office is assembling the RFP. It's a large packet, 138 pages. We're hoping to get that sent to the state by the end of February, so we can get it into the paper by the beginning of March. On the March 10th CFF subcommittee meeting, I was hoping that we could discuss the possibility of including 2 board members in this food service committee. Myself will be in this committee, as well as Dr. Riley. In between that time, up until about April 7th, when the proposals are due, I'll be taking questions from bidders. I'll be doing walkthroughs with some of the vendors. So I'll be pretty busy in between. So after the proposals come back, we go into spring break. And on the 18th of Monday, I will prepare an analysis and send all the proposals to the selected committee. Between maybe the 19th or 20th, we would like to invite the vendors in to give a presentation to our committee. And also, we'll be submitting scoring sheets to the committee. On the 22nd, those scoring sheets should be due back to central office so I can prepare another analysis. On the 26th of April, the committee will get together again and review and evaluate all our vendors. And we should make a recommendation or take a recommendation to the full board at that time. And that recommendation will be brought forward on the May 3rd meeting. And by May 17th, which is the second Board of Ed meeting, we would like to award one of the vendors the contract. So if you have any questions about the calendar, it's pretty busy. It's definitely subject to change.
Is there any discussion from the board members? Mr. Frisson.
It's not about the calendar, it's more about the whole school lunch process. Do you have a sense of whether we're actually going to see much in the way of bids, or whether that's another tough area? I know that both that and transportation have been tough in general over the last couple of years. I'm wondering if we're going to see a similar limitation as we saw in transportation RFP.
Well, my feeling is that we'll see more than one. So, I've had a few vendors reach out to me already and just try to, get a heads up on what we expect, our initiatives going forward. So I'm thinking 3 or 4 months by next.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the school lunch contract? In here somewhere, are we going to be presenting the contract to the CFF committee so that they can review it for a recommendation to the board?
Yeah, we'll bring it to the CFF. We'll definitely be discussing it. It's going to be a hot topic. And the CFF committee, the subcommittee, the food service committee, will bring that to the board. So we'll all get together, we're going to score, we're going to evaluate our vendors, and then we'll bring that to the board.
So the committee, which is the food service committee, which is two members, likely of the CFF, but then is it going to go to the entire committee of the CFF?
It doesn't have to be the CFF committee, so it can be any board members, so it's a separate committee.
Okay, but will there be a step between the committee scoring and reviewing and then the CFF and then the board?
Yeah, we can do that.
Any questions on the financial report? I have one. So we have $120,000 for 4 health placements that have been prorated. Did you calculate what the full year cost for those 4 students would be?
Yes.
And it would be?
Well, we calculated what we put in the prorated amount. Now, remember, these students haven't been placed yet, so it's kind of difficult to say what's going to be obvious at a higher cost
So we won't know until they actually get to be calculated.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I do get a sense, they feel where they may be going, so that's what I'm anticipating obligations come.
Okay, so any other discussion? All in favor of accepting the financial report? Unanimous? Moving on to presentations. We have a first read of the English 2 curriculum.
Good evening, everybody. So I've had an opportunity to meet several of you, but I know that there are board members I haven't had a chance to meet yet, so happy to meet you and thank you for serving on our board. My name is Abby Marks. I'm the English department chair at Newtown High School, where I've been a teacher for 18 years and the last 7 years I've served as department chair. I hope it's not too inconvenient, but I actually wanted to start with the composition curriculum because I'm presenting 2 courses this evening, if that's okay. So two curriculum projects that were worked on last summer that we're presenting. And as I mentioned, the first one I want to discuss is our composition through current issues course. This is one of the semester electives that we offer to students typically in their senior year. Students typically take English 1, 2, and then American literature, American studies, or EP language and composition, and then take typically 2 semester electives in their senior year. So this is one of those courses. It's offered at both the CP, college prep, and honors level. And beginning next year, we've actually opened it up to any interested juniors who are co-enrolled in American literature or American studies if they would like to take an additional English elective in their junior year. The goals of the revisions that were completed this past summer included creating updated concept-based units for this course, which have not been updated for quite a few years. Through those updates to foster student investment through their choice, allowing them to choose topics and promote authentic writing experiences that were aligned to the Connecticut course standards for writing. I'm just going to review offer a brief overview of the concept-based units that are in this course. You'll see for each unit I've listed a conceptual lens. Some of the concepts that you can see in these fleshed out units that I would receive copies of, as well as the summative assessment that would be given within each unit. So for all of our semester electives, because they're typically offered in the senior year, we offer a college essay unit at the start of the semester. So those of you who have seen me present these courses before will recognize this unit. The conceptual lens is identity, and students really, there's a lot of resources to also draw on things that they have written over the course of their time at Newtown High School, to think about what makes them individual and how they can convey themselves the best way possible to the colleges that they're applying to. When this course is taught in the second semester, that unit, which is usually a couple of weeks, they just move past it. The second unit, which actually continues throughout the course of the entire semester, is about the writing process. We have a student-run writing center at Newtown High School that is based on the model that they use at the University of Connecticut at stores. And students, it's based on peer conferencing, on students reading and listening to each other's work and providing that feedback. So not just sharing a Google Doc with someone and having them leave comments, but actually having a conversation about your writing. So in this course, because it's based on composition, we feel strongly that really understanding the value of that peer conference is very important. And going through a drafting and revision process with specific intentions is important. So that's something that's carried out throughout all of the units. And our students not only are invited to visit the Writing Center and engage in conferencing, but then actually learn to conduct those conferences themselves and practice them as well. In the third unit, students focus on the power of persuasion, which we all know is very powerful and prevalent in our world today. So during this unit, using that lens of persuasion, students would study rhetorical devices. They would work on identifying rhetoric and rhetorical strategies in
current contemporary writing. And then as their summative assessment, would work on identifying a problem at Newtown High School and writing an essay using the rhetorical devices they've identified in others' writing to determine what a solution would be. This past semester, I just wanted to share because I thought it was very engaging to hear what students had to say about what they would change at our high school. One student wrote in favor of block scheduling. One student wrote in favor of changing the formative and summative grading system that we use. And even though we have one of the later start times in the state, one student even wrote about pushing the start time of school later. But really an opportunity for students to authentically think about how they would use these skills in the world that they live in. The fourth unit is based on, again, something that students will have to do a lot of once they get into postgraduate schooling with a research paper. So thinking about credibility, again, we also is incredibly important. Walking students through the research process of identifying sources, looking at bias, working on their skills of synthesis, and then ultimately writing a research paper, sort of building off the idea of what's a problem at NHS, building off of it to a broader context, what is America's biggest problem, and synthesize sources to determine how they can solve that, how that should be solved. The second to last unit, again, tries to help students think about how nonfiction writing in particular can be really engaging and relevant. And this unit was inspired for the teachers who wrote this curriculum by a series that's been published for a number of years called the Best American Essay Series. Every year they put together collections of, as you see, Best American Food Writing, Best American Travel Writing, Best American Sports Writing, Science and Nature Writing, and collect, again, really engaging essays from a variety of different publications over the course of the year that draw people in, that really tell stories in an engaging way, but that are researched and are not the kind of fictional stories our students tend to think of as being more engaging. But to show students that they can write about something they're truly passionate about without it necessarily being a persuasive essay, that you can really delve into a subject that you're interested in. So students pick their own genre that they want to write in ultimately and write an essay modeled off one of these collections. And then finally, the last unit, again, is drawn from what we felt like students of writing, what would be most practical for them moving forward. Because regardless of what field you pursue, you need to know how to craft effective emails and present yourself professionally in a resume and cover letter. So part of this is looking through the lens of practicality and professionalism, working with students to create these items for themselves, again, by studying models and looking at obviously other fields. And also researching jobs that you like that they really like to have. So the teacher who taught this the last semester actually said that this was a very engaging unit for the students. They felt that it was really valuable and applicable to where they are in their lives. And I realized, honestly, I forgot to mention the incredible colleagues of mine who actually worked on this curriculum this past summer. Kathy Swift and Rick Lai, both who have taught this course and are longtime veterans of Newtown School, and bring unique backgrounds and interests into this course and do a really excellent job. So before I move on to talking about English 2, are there questions about composition?
Mr. Cruson?
Just a comment. Thank you for teaching students how to write emails.
We try.
It is a skill that I would notice needs a little more presence in everyday life in general. So I'm glad that they're getting a chance to at least learn how to do it.
Mr. Ramsey?
Sometimes I have a tendency to talk too much, and Mr. Boris has to put the hook on. But anyway, as I said to you in the subcommittee meeting, I wish that I had a course like this when I was in high school. I love the marriage between, you know, the practicality of it all and the concept with the college preparation, the real world and their own interest incorporated into it. Just draws people in like me, you know, that otherwise may feel a little lack of interest in more theoretical aspects of writing. So I just want to say how much I really appreciated hearing the presentation tonight and at the subcommittee meeting. And, you know, just continue promoting the joy of lifelong learning, because I see that in here big time. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you. Now let's go to the next.
Thank you. The next curriculum is a little bit more complicated, although there are fewer units. Because it is our English 2 course, it's the course that most sophomores take. It's a full year course. Once they take our English 1, they move on to English 2. It's also offered at the college prep and the honors level. We have an incredible team of teachers who worked on this curriculum this past summer, including some long-term veterans at the high school, as well as some teachers who were teaching this particular course for the first time this coming year, including one of our teachers who had just joined us from the middle school. So it was a really excellent group with a lot of perspective to bring to what has worked, but also what we need to think about as we try to best meet the needs of our sophomore students. So the goals of the revisions for English 2 were to revise our generalizations and guiding questions as needed. These units had been written in concept-based format, so this is really sort of a fine-tuning. And our team is really focused on adding a wider variety of resources for teachers to use in terms of texts, both in text and assignments, and to make sure that there were common assessments delineated in the curriculum so that a new teacher coming along to teach this course would have a clear sense of what they were expected to have students do over the course of each quarter. So this course is set out in 4 units that really correspond to the 4 quarters of our year. And because, as you can imagine, we have all, approximately, 380 to 400 sophomores taking this course at the same time, we don't necessarily have every student reading the same book at the same time. So the way that the concept-based course is written is that the concepts, the skills are the same within each unit, but the texts that the teachers use within their classroom are from a wide selection, but will vary from class to class. And that allows teachers to really not only think about the interests of their students, the skill level of their students, what they think might work with a particular concept with the students that are in front of them. So it provides some flexibility for teachers and at times choice for students while ensuring that our students have common experience. So the first unit opens by thinking about conventions and unconventional in storytelling, looking through the lens of structure and form. And I have to say, having taught this course last year for the first time in a while, this was a really fun unit because you're working with students to think about what a story really is. They're used to looking at short stories, but we started off at that point looking at 6-word stories. Can you tell a story, a full story in 6 words? Can you look at shapes moving around on a flat surface and interpret that as a story? And then looking at how authors manipulate structure and form to create a story. One of the other ones that students really love to read is just told through a series of canceled checks, which of course nobody really looks at anymore, canceled checks. But the idea you can really read between the lines and understand what unites us as people by looking at the way we understand stories. So in looking at these processes like selecting text evidence, close reading and inferencing, students might engage in text like short stories, as well as, for example, one of the texts teachers use frequently in this unit is The House on Mango Street by Senator Cisneros, which is told in a series of short vignettes that students often find very interesting because there's a lot of symbolism and meaning, even though they're very brief and lengthy.
So after talking about all of this, students ultimately write their own narratives as some of an assessment that manipulates structure and form in a unique way to convey the elements of the story. They move on from thinking about what a story is to digging into why we tell stories through the lens of voice and identity. Students continue to move on looking at close reading, but also thinking about how they make meaning, how they question, how they predict, and how the way that we tell stories about ourselves ultimately helps us understand culture, humanity, and each other's values. Some of the texts, again, that are available in this unit, there are a variety of full-length and short texts and films as well. The Catcher in the Rye, which is a classic, but we also have the very popular and engaging memoir by Trevor Noah called Modern Crime, which again, trying to pair classic texts with options for students that let them see how these concepts apply across time periods and across cultures. The common summative assessment would be a close reading of a passage from a text or a short text in an essay form, and then the midterm exam where they answer a guiding question using a new short story that they're presented with on the day of the exam. In Unit 3, you might see some parallels to that composition curriculum, and we have a focus on argument, which is one of the types of writing that we focus on as well. Looking through the lens of purpose and perspective, students will build on the introduction to rhetoric that they had in their freshman year, learn about the concepts of ego, concepts and logos, and ultimately build up towards giving a presentation using research to argue their belief on a contemporary issue. So while they're engaging and learning these skills, they might be reading texts like the play 12 Angry Men, or the dystopian science fiction novel, Fahrenheit 451. Again, these are just some of the texts that are available, but I was trying to highlight some that show the variety that students are exposed to. And finally, in the last unit, now that they've thought about what stories are, why they tell stories, what the skills of argument are, the last unit is based on the concept of agency. How do you take these things that you know about yourself and about the world around you and do something with them, whatever that may be? How do you give yourself the agency to act? So students, the main skill that they're working on in this unit is synthesis, so being able to look at a variety of sources and synthesize for themselves what those sources are saying together. And some of the texts that they look at, the two that I have here, Sophocles' play Oedipus the King, which they love to talk about his blindness and crazy mythology behind his story, which is still referenced in our culture today. We also have texts like Of Mice and Men, again, another classic, as well as a variety of texts that our teachers worked to include and vet last year, looking for texts that would engage a wide variety of readers, both level-wise and interest-wise, including the young adult book All American Boys, Elizabeth Acevedo's With the Fire on High, and a couple of books by Sue Monahan as some examples of books that can be used in book clubs to allow students to hear different voices and look at how the same concepts that they're seeing in these classic texts show up in contemporary texts as well. The end of the year is a final exam where students actually look at a question, a big guiding question that they have to answer with evidence from multiple texts that they read over the course of the year. So again, it really is building on that skill of synthesis and asking you to think about what all of these they've looked at over the course of the year and what that really says about this question. So those are our
Are there any questions? Ms. Herron?
So my son is in the course right now. And Jen, I want to say to you that the next best thing to taking the classes is when your child is in high school, telling them to take the classes, and then you get to kind of take the classes. Exactly. But I'll just say that I really do appreciate the work that went into creating these units, but also into ensuring that there were audience of authors. So I think that's really important that we continue looking at that. So I'm really happy to see him bring those home. I'm really happy to see them on the curriculum, so I appreciate the work that was done.
Any other comments or questions? So I have a question just to make sure I understood this correctly. So when you talk about synthesizing in my simplified language, is this like you've got these books that all basically have a universal concept, but all from a different perspective? And so the synthesizing is really to look at this universal concept and what it means here and what it means there.
Absolutely. Looking at, for example, if the question is, what is power? And you're trying to come up with a definition of what is power, using evidence from in Oedipus' power was this, but in Place's power was this, in another power was this, and you're pulling together evidence from those multiple perspectives or ways that you are defining it.
Well, that's just wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much. We look forward to our second read.
I appreciate it.
So moving on to new business, we have discussion and possible action on face mask coverings and policy 4118.237/4218.237/5141.8.
Sounds so official.
And I'm going to repeat that right now.
I move that the Board of Education approve the suspension of policy 4118.237/4218.237/5141.8 face mask coverings.
Motion made by Ms. Larkin, seconded by Mr. Ramsey.
I have something that I think might qualify as a point of order. I know we're doing this under our policy, I can't remember the number now, 9311, but it states when we suspend a policy, it needs to be for a specified purpose and limited time. So I think our motion may at least be the purpose. I think it will become clear through the presentation, but I think the motion might need to include the time in it.
Agreed. So why don't we do this? Why don't we start with the presentation? That will make both the purpose and the time frame much more apparent. And then once we finish with the presentation, we will then make an amendment to add the time.
I'm fine with that.
So thank you. So again, good evening. First of all, I wanted to say thank you all for being here, and I really do appreciate the voices on behalf of your children. I wanted to start by saying that we've listened to many respectful opinions and input on the topic of masks, as you know, many emails as well over the course of the last couple of weeks. And thank you, Don, for responding to many of those. On a very important mitigation strategy that has been used since the beginning of the pandemic in masks in schools. And this, of course, went well beyond just school use. It was in the communities and the municipalities and across every state in the nation. And as I said, and I believe in a recent communication to parents, the knowledge and understanding of this virus has changed over time and gone through many, many iterations, and our knowledge has changed and grown. Tonight, I'm not here to debate science. I think we've all heard much of the science, even tonight, and thank you for those that shared nuances, new articles. We can also find research and data out there to fit a variety of narratives, and you all know that happens every day. However, tonight I believe is the beginning of a discussion to find a path forward. As you know, we've been given that flexibility, so that I believe tonight is about personal responsibility and that becomes far more important now than ever before in order to live with COVID in the future. We saw the beginning of this, the slow lifting of restrictions in large gatherings, businesses, restaurants, and I think minimizing the time for isolation and quarantine, as you know, put out communication on that, and the screen and stay approach that we also articulated at a previous board meeting and have been using. So I think all of this was really the beginning of going down that path, and I wanted to really emphasize that this evening. So I thought it might be important to review historically where we've been and where we are right now. So as you know, back in March of 2020, we went into a full shutdown. And then to a return the next fall in August using hybrid. And I will tell you that we went into hybrid not because of the reasons you would think. As you know, we had 0% or 1% at that time when we first came back. We did it for a very different reason, and that was to support our staff, who had been, again, thrown into a brand new situation with countless restrictions and protocols and new technology, and we felt we didn't really look around and see what other districts were doing as far as I was concerned and we were concerned. It was really about our community and our staff, because we wanted to make sure they knew what they were doing and how to ease back into school, because that would be good for kids. And we're very glad that we did what we did. Then we went to a full remote at some point in December of that same year due to a high number of absenteeism that impacted the functioning of the district. But I will tell you, again, it was less about cases, and it was really more around, we had principals out, we had staff out, and it was starting to wear on how we could function. And put out information on that, and we ended up with, thanks to the community stepping up, substitutes signing up in 2 weeks. And that really helped bring it back to where we could function. And then from January, we remained in full, January 2021, we remained in full in-person learning with, of course, accommodations at the secondary level where students were going home to take a class. And again, that was following all of the restrictions and the protocols, because we had to still social distance. There were things that we were following based on our local health department and the CDC. Since December of 2021, we lifted contact tracing, followed less restrictive quarantine protocols, and as I mentioned, moved to screen and stay. And I really believe this is and will become just the beginning of a step forward. So I bring that up because I wanted to go back and show you the dashboard. And I believe Ann Dalton, she may be on the phone, from November 2020 through March of 2021, so basically last March. At that time, many quarantined staff and students. If you recall, as I mentioned, it impacted our functioning, and we needed to make some changes and go remote at one point. And then, sorry about that. If you look at this, we found fewer cases, actual positive COVID cases at that time from November 2020 to March 2021 in November and December then, because most of it was about quarantining and contact tracing. So that I found very interesting. Even then, when I think people thought we're out because we have so many cases, it really was more about contact tracing and the quarantining. We did have 63 positive students and 13 staff in January following the break. Still not what was expected at the time, because the emails I was receiving from everyone was, don't come back in full following that break, if you recall. but I made the decision to come back in full, and we were okay. So now, just to let you know, we have tracked, like most districts, our cases and positivity rates, but also what I think is really important here is the low transmissibility we have received, and we have seen. And I will tell you that we did, as many districts in the Southwest area, we put together all of our data and we've sent it to the state, we've sent it to the DPH, because we wanted them to know, even a year and a half ago, that we were seeing very little transmissibility in the schools. In Connecticut, the coronavirus associated hospitalizations right now continue to drop, and the daily positivity rate has decreased over 1.5 percentage points just over the last weekend. And that's at 3.32%. When we came back and we wanted to come back in full and with optional masks this past year, we were at 1%. Not much different. So this is why we've heard from the governor. We're seeing some lifting of restrictions, not only in Connecticut, but in other states as well. You can all see the media and read the media, and you've seen it in other states. After Governor Lamont's press conference, the state, the House, and the Senate voted to extend mask mandates until February 28th, after which time districts are able to make their own determination, and that flexibility was really important to us. However, we need to understand also, and I just wanted to emphasize that the state DPH and Department of Education are also able to reinstate the mandate through June 30th in the event they feel it is necessary. And again, this will depend on changes in metrics. For example, a sudden new surge in cases and hospitalizations, and of course this would be in consult with the Commissioner of Public Health. In addition, I will tell you, I was just on this morning, we're on weekly with the DPH. We're still awaiting some guidance because, as you know, many districts have already moved through their own meetings to go with an optional mask plan. But as the state of Connecticut, the Public Health Commissioner, Manisha Jahani, noted, we're transitioning to a different way. We have to manage this virus in our lives. And all of us, I'm sure, have seen restrictions lifted in venues, public venues, and other areas, and this will most likely continue as the trends are more positive as we move forward. So in anticipation of all of this, I worked with the Teachers Union Executive Board, reviewed this with the Teacher Culture and Climate Committee just yesterday, I believe it was, discussed this with the paras, the paraprofessionals, the Culture and Climate Committee, and the PTA presidents. I wanted to be sure that everyone, every group, understood that there would still be protocols in place, even if we moved to a mask optional approach. We really had a very healthy and robust discussion and outlined together some of the areas that we wanted to remain in place if we were to move on February 28th to an optional mask. First and most importantly, as I mentioned, this is about personal responsibility. As you know, we began moving in this direction, as I mentioned, with lifting the contact tracing. But one of the things that I think was most important, brought up by every group, was the first bullet you see. And that would be to facilitate a deliberate dialogue with students, both at home and in classrooms, so that students understand that I might choose as an individual to wear a mask, but my friend next to me might choose not to. We found that to be very important. I know I will be working, depending on what we decide decide tonight would be working with my administrators on Friday during our administrative team to make that very important point moving forward. We still have staff, leaders, and students who will wear masks. I'm sure you will see that in every school across the district, and that's okay. And know that students, because it is federal legislation, students will have to ride school buses with masks and until something changes there. That can't be changed by us. That can't be optional. They have to board the buses with masks on. So just to go through some of the things that are continued protocols, as I mentioned, the buses providing N95 masks as we do for all of our staff. We also provide home test kits when needed. We also just recently, and I'm sure many of you just received Mrs. Dalton's communication about the DETECT, which is an optional testing program for students, and that will be offered. You have to have at least 10 students in a particular building for that to take place in that building. Sanitizing bathrooms, we're not changing any of the spacing in classrooms. We are not taking lunchways out. We're not changing anything that we have in place at this point. Ongoing mask breaks, it's really disheartening to hear when I hear that students, in certain areas might not perceive that they have them. I know that I've been in many classes, they're eating snacks without masks in the classroom. So I think some of that is perception, but I want to make sure that that continues even if we have optional masks. We want to provide access to the local clinics as we do now. We have partners throughout Danbury and in the local areas for vaccination clinics, and I know our Director of Health, local health director does a phenomenal job of that, as does Mrs. Dalton, providing vaccination clinics and booster clinics as well. We will encourage, as we always have, ongoing self-monitoring of illness, keeping students home, staying home as adults as well, continuing our screen and stay, continuing our dashboard of cases, because I think that's useful. We will be monitoring those trends in consult with our local health director and, of course, the state DPH. So I did want to mention, as a result of moving to optional masking, there are some changes that will be necessary. If you recall, my original return to school plan back in July had optional masks. That's where we were going. The only thing that preempted that, of course, were the executive orders by the governor. So we would update our return to school plan as needed. And we will also have language that I think was asked for, which was just recently shared with our attorneys and tweaked, and I'm going to read it to you. The superintendent will continue to report health trends to the Board of Education during their regular meetings. While masking will no longer be mandatory at this time, the district will continue to employ all other mitigation strategies in the schools and outlined in the return to school plan. The superintendent will continue to consult with the local health director and the district's health and wellness coordinator to monitor COVID-19 trends, as well as to respond to state guidance, and may need to consider temporary changes to mitigation strategies, which may include a return to masking for a clearly defined period of time. This is in alignment, just so you know, with the state's authority as it currently stands now. But most importantly, as a Board of Ed, you would need to suspend the face covering policy as we discussed. And again, suspending it also means it can be reinstated at any And just wanted to say I do respect the voices I've heard, some of whom said, let's just hang on a little longer, let's wait till mid-March, let's wait till April 1st. And I really did think a lot about that, but this really doesn't change anything. If not now, then when? It's about, I believe, the emotional cost on our children, and we need to speak on their behalf, as some of you has mentioned, as parents. I think it's the same is true as from an educational standpoint as well. Everyone will have the ability to make their choices from a personal level, as an employee in our schools, and as a family when it comes to children. But we also need to be mindful. We have to be fair on the other side and be mindful of trends and changes that we see on the COVID landscape and be ready to make adjustments there as well. We've actually done that throughout the pandemic, so that won't be anything new. With that, I would recommend putting this into place on February 28th, but working with students and families during the week leading up to that date, so that everyone is aware of the expectations in a respectful manner, personal choice and responsibility. This will also include the fact that students will need to understand they will need masks on buses, on the way to school, and during departure home. And that's all I have. Are there any questions?
Questions and comments? Ms. Kuzma?
First, I just want to say thank you to everybody that came out to speak.
You need to go right up to the mic.
Sorry. Thank you to everybody who came out to speak and share their thoughts tonight, and to those on the phone that had called in, all of the emails that we received over. I think it's evident that this is an issue that our community is passionate about, and people just wanted to be heard tonight. So thank you guys for coming out. And I understand that this is probably not something that was easy for you to decide or take in lightly. So thank you, Dr. Rodriguez, and Dalton, and Dr. Holbrook for taking the time and effort to really look at this, think about where we can be. And I think we all know that COVID still exists, and there are going to be staff and students who are at a higher risk. And that's why I'm glad that we're discussing mask optional at this point, rather than just like a full removal of the masks, because I do feel that everybody should be able to continue to wear one if they want to, and feel safe in doing so. But as a parent who has advocated for mask choice for almost a year now, I'm really happy to see that we're finally in a place where parents can have a say what they feel is best for their child. And, you know, I think as we've heard tonight in the emails, unfortunately, we're not escaping this without harming our children. This did do some harm to our kids. And I think it's time to put them first. And I'm happy to hear that we are hopefully moving in a direction where as soon as the city lifts this, that we will move forward and allow mass adoption. Because I think that's going to give us the best chance at getting back to providing the best educational experience for all of Newtown's children. So I am in full support of this plan.
Any other comments? Mr. Croissant?
I have two questions. The first, and I know we're hoping that DPH will supply some guidance on this, but has there been consideration as to concrete metrics that might be used to decide the need to go back to masks, or that, as you said, could go back in for a fairly defined period of time?
I have to be honest, that's probably what we're waiting for, because the Commissioner of Public Health can make that happen. And that would be, again, rising trends where the positivity rate is going in the wrong direction. And you'll know it when we see it. We've been there before. But I will say that, so we are waiting for DPH guidance, which may be around, more around quarantining and contact tracing and things that have been in place already. But I will tell you, even the metrics that we had, if you recall, going way back, had over 25 cases. You remember the color-coded chart. We were all in the red across the state of Connecticut, where we were earlier, very early on, told that when you're in the red and you have over the 25, you go out, you go on remote, less in-person instruction. We learned probably very early on that after a while that wasn't helpful at all. So the entire state of Connecticut was in the red, and everyone was in school. So I think we've had a difficult time following a particular metric, which is why they haven't really gone back to giving us metrics of that nature. But I think, Donna Colbert, I don't know if Donna's on the phone, or Ian, but we've talked about, we will be in close consult with each other and with DPH if we feel that trends are moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I was thinking more on the local level, because I know the state at any point could go up until June 30th, can go full state mask. I was just thinking trends on a more local level, and especially within the school itself. We start to see a severe spike. It would be nice to know that there is a metric that says, okay, we need to.
I think we're going to know by the impact on our staffing. That's the metric we're talking about as well, because if we can't function, we've had over 500 students out in 1 month. And that is because of quarantine and contact tracing. That's really what it was. When we start to see it's impacting our staffing, as it was, I don't know, last November, I think it was December, we almost had to close because of it. So we're going to keep those kinds of trends in mind, knowing that the positivity rate is going in the wrong direction, and we're seeing it impacting our staff.
And my second question was around, I'm concerned with this being a choice that we are going to see instances of bullying of those who are not masked bullying those who are choosing to be masked and vice versa. I know you said that there will be a dialogue at the beginning, but I'm wondering what thought has been given to ongoing making sure that this isn't happening, because yes, it would be good for everyone to have a choice, but I want them to feel safe in making that choice and not pressure to go one way or the other.
Can I just say that I've heard the bullying in the last 2 weeks from a variety of, whether it's staff or parents, and I have to be honest with you. We were so worried when we first came back that students would not comply with the masking. I remember that, I'm sure you all do as parents and as board members. And we never had an issue. I think we put little faith in our students, and I have to be honest with you, they have been more compliant, more patient, more respectful, and we have to give credit to them for that. And I know that when we talk as a family, that's why I said it won't just come from teachers. It's got to come from home as well. So that message will not only come from us, and we're going to spend time, advisories, in homerooms. We're going to make sure that we really have a good dialogue with students about that, about personal choice and responsibility, but it also has to happen at home. So that same message I will be sending home to ask families respectfully to sit down with children and talk about that as well.
I tend to be a prepared for the worst case scenario.
That's why I think this will be a good approach.
So I do hope that it won't be a concern. I do know even now there are pockets of it. There are pockets of, even with everyone masked, there are pockets of that kind of peer pressure, bullying type stuff going on. So overall, yeah, I think the students have been really good. I just worry about those pockets and making sure we're not accidentally creating an uncomfortable situation, because much like we heard today, where kids need to have the mask choice to be comfortable, they need to be comfortable that the choice they made is that their peers will respect that. So I appreciate the fact that you have a plan for the initial dialogue. I just want to make sure we're not losing sight of the fact that sometimes those messages get forgotten along the way, and there might need to be some refreshers here or there, or making sure that that's not
And I I do think staff will be very cognizant of that, because that will be part of the training that we're going to do as well, or at least the discussions we will have.
Thank you.
Ms. Larkin?
Thank you. I kind of wanted to tag on to the back of what you just said, Dan. And, you know, there has been bullying for a while. And it's the adults, it's not the kids. There's social media groups dedicated to bullying adults in town who for the last year have chosen to remove their masks. They've boycotted businesses because they didn't wear their mask correctly. Okay? So the bullying has gone on, all right? And unfortunately, it's coming from the adults. It's not the children. The lesson needs, the message does definitely need to go to them. I've already had the conversation with my kids, but I think it starts with better behavior for adults and respecting people's choice. And I think for the last better part of the year, even when we didn't have mask mandates in Newtown, people were being shamed for making a choice that was best for them. And this was the adult behavior I'm talking about. So I do agree with you. It is a problem. And the problem, the solution to the problem, it starts with us. And bullying is bullying regardless.
Wow, this is really something, you know, quite a controversy with this nationwide. But I would be remiss if I didn't compliment the previous board and the superintendent for the way they've handled the COVID-19, you know, from the very beginning of this scourge. I guess that I was the most impacted by the emails that I received from the parents and the young people, the students. Much more so than my non-custom responses indicated. I guess I feel in this situation that the masking has gone on perhaps way too long, that the cure or the mitigation for the problem of COVID-19 has become worse than the malady itself. And that's true as presented by many parents with great wisdom in the town that have anecdotally issued accounts of the, I'm being a little dramatic, but really the deep suffering of our young people with a myriad of situations that have been created by these masks. In addition to the fact that it's virtually impossible to monitor the wearing of the mask by the teachers in a fashion where everyone can comply to wearing the mask. So it's ineffectual, really. So in line with all the difficulties associated with masks, the fact that there's deep questions in terms of whether masks work in the first place, as evidenced by the Johns Hopkins recent study in the issue, and the fact that the kids need to get back to a situation where they can realize the joy of learning. I was just heartbroken by some of the accounts of the lack of joy alone, forget the maladies associated with mask wearing, but the lack of joy that some of these youngsters have suffered, particularly you know, the kids that are starting out in school that have never experienced what it's like to see a smile on a teacher's face when they do something wonderful in the classroom. The joy has been stripped. And so it's time to move on, and I have full trust and confidence in Dr. Rod Reed, as did the previous board, to navigate the situation, to monitor the situation on the ground in a manner that is fluid, with common sense, and common sense married with the theoretical aspects of advisement from health professionals. So I guess in summary, my opinion in the matter is that common sense rules. Thank you.
Mr. Kusan actually touched on a point that I had questions about, so I appreciate that. And Ms. Larkin, I appreciate your speech about bullying, and I just think that kind of goes, you know, the two comments go hand in hand. I think this issue is a volatile one, and I really do hope that parents take the same care as they took instructing their children to wear the masks, and that they do when they talk about personal choice and responsibility. And I have to say, I love hearing people being so passionate about choice and personal responsibility, and I hope that that conversation continues as we go into other topics in the future on this board. I'm a mom of 4 kids, 1 outside the district, 3 in the district. I'm married to a first grade teacher, and I have a social work background. So I come at this from a lot of different perspectives, but I'm not a doctor, and I'm not an educator myself. And so when I joined this board, I said that I would listen to those experts who knew far more about the issue than me. And on the last board, we made a decision that in this area, we would listen to Ann Dalton and Don Colbert and finally Dr. Rodriguez in making these sort of decisions around this terrible virus. I also have to say I have a personal issue with hearing the word trauma associated with masks, given their relate. I have a son who was in first grade during Sandy Hook, and hearing trauma associated with a piece of fabric on the face is very difficult for a lot of people in the community. Not to at all say what children have gone through to diminish what they've gone through since the COVID started, but it's just a difficult word to use here. But I do understand because I do have children, and I do understand learning has been difficult. So that all to say, in my convoluted way of speaking, it's a difficult position that we're put in as a board, and never when I joined the board did I think that we would put in a position to make choices about health. But here we are, thanks to our governor. And so I'm glad you're all here, and I listened to what you had to say. I will say that we have voices on both sides, and so it is a really important issue to our community, and it is not just a clear-cut decision, and I want everyone to understand that. Sometimes it's hard to speak in a room full of people who don't always agree with your position, so I just wanted to say that there were many voices that did not represent the majority of this room that we heard from as well. But I do appreciate all of them coming forward because it is very difficult, and I especially appreciate the children that spoke. Public speaking is not easy when you're 9, when you're 12, or when you're 44. So, but I'm not 44. I'm like you. I'm 18. So I don't know. Maybe when you're 44 or so. But anyway, I do appreciate all of you coming to speak, and all of you sharing your opinions, and all of you being respectful here and going forward of everyone's choice and personal decision regarding their health and safety. I think that's really important. This has been a volatile issue for far too long, and I think it's time for us to put this aside and move forward as a community. So thank you.
Mine's a follow-up to what Mr. Ramsey and Mr. Herman said, in a way. Thank you for bringing up the previous board's decision, because my perception of what we are voting on tonight is not so much mask, no mask, optional, anything. It goes back to the fact that as a board member, I put my trust in Dr. Colbert and Dr. Rodriguez to make the best decision because of the ever-fluid situation and having the best resources to make a decision. So for me, this is a decision more on, once again, giving more flexibility, giving the flexibility needed to make decisions on a changing basis. And that's what actually was one of my questions. It's not I'm not making the decision tonight. What we do is giving the power to those who have the ability to make those decisions, that informed decisions. So I appreciate you answering my questions. And again, I've never asked that we pull back because we have
Ms. Kuzma.
Yes, I just want to kind of go back to the issue of bullying that's been addressed. And having 4 kids, I have been to numerous after-school activities, sports events, birthday parties, all where children have, some have been masked and some have been unmasked. And not once with all of my coaches have I ever witnessed anybody approaching a child as being bullying a child for choosing to wear the mask. And I guess my question to you, Dr. Rodriguez, is, there are instances where this is happening in school, whether a child out of recess, right, that they are allowed to be some optional, some kids are choosing to wear them, snack time, some children might choose to wear them. Have you heard any reports of any bullying happening?
Personally, no. We have students who know that they take their masks off at recess, will not take them off for their own reasons. They're still playing, they're still with other students. Same is true as you mentioned in the classroom. Look, these are students, these are kids. We know that there are lots of things that probably go on. Some we know about, some we may never know about. But when we do find things out like that, the staff is really good about handling that. And that would be true of this like anything else. And we will call home because I think it's this important. We won't wait. Once we get the message out, and parents should be sitting down with students on this. And I think that's why it was the top bullet. It's the most important thing to make a shift like this. Remember, they've been in masks for all this time. So it will be a switch for some, but we want to make sure that they all have the same understanding and expectation that they have they're making a choice, or their families are making a choice as well.
I think it's time for me to speak up so that it's more of a conversation rather than a last word. So I'm a slightly different, a person with a slightly different focus. From my point of view, as a member of the Board of Education, we need to make sure that our schools promote academic learning, promote social, emotional health and wellness, and ensure the physical health and safety of our children. So when I'm looking at this, I trust, but I verify. That's just generally the type of person I am. So the question is the risk assessment. So if you think about back in March of 2020, if somebody ended up getting COVID, that was really, really, really bad news. I mean, so you would do everything you could in your power to actually try and keep those cases down. At this point, it seems, throughout all of this time, we've heard things like children aren't, when they do get COVID, they basically sail right through it. It's more like just a cold. And then comes the Omicron, and it's even more just like a cold. So the risk to a child's ability to come back to school and learn is lessened, right? So these are the types of questions that I would be very happy to hear more about from Anne or Donna in terms of risk assessment, in terms of the staff, I mean, the vaccination status. Because again, we know that if somebody, now that we have vaccinations, we know if somebody was vaccinated, that if they get COVID, then they're much less likely to have as severe a case as they would have had in the past. And so looking at it from a question of health and safety for the students, for the staff, in terms of academic learning loss, those risks seem to have abated significantly over the last 2 years. But it seems to be, and I just like some comfort to hear that from a health professional who would know more than I would know.
So we do have Ann Dalton in the audience. Come on up, Ann. I know Donna Colbert's on the phone. So we did have a meeting. We consult with each other all the time. But I have to go back to saying that even the directors of health in many communities along with our phone calls. We're on weekly with the DPH, and so is Ann and Donna, I believe. The reason why I think a lot of the restrictions you're seeing decreasing is just based on what you said. You know, the very early understanding of the virus, and the very early virus in its natural form when it first came out, obviously it was serious. It was far more serious and was hitting all of the vulnerable populations. And then when we had the Delta variant, it was transmissible and it was, you know, serious as well. We kept all of the mitigation strategies going. That was the guidance, and that's the reason. Omicron, obviously, highly transmissible, but again, less serious when it came to the less vulnerable populations, like children, for example. But I will have Ian speak to from a nurse perspective.
And I would agree with everything that you said, Lori.
You could speak close to your
Sorry,
phone.
better? I would agree with everything that both of you said, really, that all of those factors weigh into it. In terms of risk, we had no vaccines when we started out, so everyone was exceedingly vulnerable. And what we had was contact tracing, which is sort of like, it's like a blunt instrument, but it was all that we had at that point to try to control spread. So as things have evolved over time, as Omicron was coming on, what happened was it was so transmissible and happening so quickly that contact tracing was not effective. It served no purpose at that point. And I think what we're seeing now, and what was brought up in the DPH meeting today, was more of a acknowledgement that COVID is going to be with us for the long haul, and we need to learn to live with it. And part of that, and to live with it, is pivoting and looking, move towards personal responsibility and away from, the mandate of mask wearing at this point. But part of that is that, people have been less ill with Omicron. We are a highly vaccinated community, and, those things are protected. So, I don't know if that answers your question.
But if we end up getting something as transmissible as Omicron and as serious as Delta, then
there is no guarantee that that won't happen. I feel very optimistic right now, and I'm very hopeful that we're going to continue to watch these numbers drop. I'm like writing numbers on the calendar, and I love the other day I wrote one case in all district. That's amazing. But so I'm really hopeful that we're going to continue to see that. But if we have learned anything, it is that this is an unpredictable virus. So there's no guarantee.
but this would be addressed within our return to school plan.
Yes.
I think that's the reason that DPH and SU left that box in there, that, until June 30th, they have that ability if need be. Mitigation measures back.
Thank you. Ms. Watkins?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of follow up, which is something I read today that I just kind of wanted to share, is that since schools reopened after the break, and we know that the numbers were high, right, because of the holidays, as soon as schools opened, not only did hospitalizations start dropping rapidly, but so did cases. And this is this is not the first time we have seen this trend. In schools, this is not a coincidence that schools are some of the safest places for these kids to be, okay? And what we're doing, and I think what we've heard from public, from the way we just behave as adults, myself, I go on vacation, I go out to dinner, right? Our kids play sports, they're on masks, they're at play dates, they're doing other things. And, our communities, I feel, has always had higher numbers. And when we come back into school, it's when we start seeing that decrease. So, I am with you and very optimistic that we will continue to see. Another thing I noticed is a lot of people still make that choice. Even, if you look around the town, we haven't had a man in a long time. But I think, when you meeting completely new faces, until everyone's ready. Good job, Dr.
Any other comments? So, is every person here comfortable with providing the autonomy for Dr. Rodriguez to continue with what she suggested in our presentation? It's not a motion or anything, but it's a conversation. Are we, so no change?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very, very much. And now we have to talk about is the time period. Would it make sense to put the time period to coincide with June 30th? For suspending
I had a different proposal.
the, okay?
When we originally wrote this mask policy, or when we originally discussed it as a policy committee, we purposely removed these references to COVID-19 that Kate provided in the sample, with the idea that this policy is one that can be used in the future, God forbid, something else comes around. So my thought is that we make the length of this suspension until the policy committee and then the board can review and approve a version of the policy that builds in the flexibility that we need to suspend this so that we have it available if, again, God forbid, in the future there is an instance where we need masks. Instead of just having to suspend it and then put it back into effect and suspend it again. So that's my thought process on that, is that our time period is, and I think that would satisfy 9311, saying until such time as the board reviews and implements the policy.
And approves the replacement policy, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so as an amendment, you move that.
I move that we amend the motion to read until such time as the board reviews and approves an amendment to the policy.
Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Harriman. Discussion?
I just have a question. Is there a reason that, I know you said that this, you tried to reword it, so it wasn't COVID-19 related, that we would consider rescinding the policy as opposed to just changing it?
I look at it as having something in our toolkit again for at some point in the future where it may become necessary again. God forbid, I mean, June 30th, COVID's not going to go away. You might see some really nasty variant come back next September or a year and a half from now or something where the need is felt that masks are needed, where we hit some disaster that requires it. And I hate to see us remove this policy from our policies and then have to rush to put something new in place so that we could once again use them if necessary. I don't see any harm in it sitting there and being available even if we're not exercising it.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Ms. Harriman?
So just to clarify, I mean, it would be a very broad policy that would say something, you know, just in the case of a public health emergency or something like that, not tied at all to the specific circumstances that we're under right now.
Right, yeah, it would be broad. Again, it would go through the standard process. The policy committee will look at it, review it, come up with language, and then bring it to the board for discussion and approval.
Okay, any more further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment? It's unanimous. Further discussion on the original motion, so amended? Okay, all those in favor of suspending the mask policy until such time as the Board of Ed approves its amended.
Reviews and adopt, or, yeah, reviews and approves.
Approves its amended form. All approving? welcome to leave, or you're welcome to add comments at the end of the meeting. As you wish. Moving forward, let's continue with the discussion and possible actions on May 23, early 23. Do I have a motion?
That Board of Education was approved March 23rd.
Motion by Larkin, seconded by Mark.
I'm sure you want to hear about the SAT. I'll give you some very enlightening information about the SAT. So we have a proposed change to the school calendar that's been adopted by the board for the high school on Wednesday, the 23rd. And I'm going to give you a little bit of brief background on why that is happening. So the state has decided that this is a good year to do the full digital implementation of the SAT. And so we are charged with making sure our 358 juniors are able to take the SAT on a computer at our school on Wednesday, the 23rd. So just a little bit of quick information. We have 7 computer labs in our building. We have roughly 175 desktops. We have 25 more desktops in the library that are dated but usable. And then we have about 225 Chromebooks that are up to date enough that they can push out the secure browser, which means we can administer the SATs on those. So, that being said, we also need 80 teachers to proctor these 358 students. So this is a monumental task for us to take on at the high school, which also means we need to do something else with our 9th and 10th grade students. So, some of the rationale for why we need a half day is one, because the computer labs are scattered throughout our whole entire building. We can't possibly test fairly and quietly enough and have 600 to 700 other students wandering around and moving. On top of the fact that we need 80 teachers to proctor, so we won't have anybody to teach them, even if we could figure out a way to move them around. There's also, it's a very long test. Students are tired afterwards. In the past, we have done 2 additional periods after the test. We have not seen great success in what happens during those 2 periods after the test because students are tired. It is extremely taxing. So what we are asking for is a 2-hour early dismissal. And I'll explain to you our proposed plan for the 9th and 10th graders, but a 2-hour early dismissal would allow us to test our full scope of juniors and also make it to the bus at 12:30. And allow our students with extended time or other accommodations to take the middle school bus route, which would happen at 2:30. So we created an off-site SAT, and it was super creative. This is a little out of the box for me. Social arts and team building is going to be our off-site SAT, and it will hopefully take place at the NYA and at the community center. And we will bus our 9th and 10th grade students over to those 2 locations. I've spoken to Matt and to Maggie extensively, and they will have a little bit of a mental health day. They will be able to play games. We have a hypnotist coming. They can use the pool. They'll be baking, pottery, mindfulness, coloring, yoga, and all kinds of activities for our 9th and 10th graders. So the purpose of that is twofold. One, it gets them out of the building. It helps us proctor the SAT. And 2, it gives them a little bit of fun. It falls right at the end of our 3rd quarter. We just did the check-in fair at the end of the 2nd quarter, and so this puts us in another place to kind of check in with our students 10-ish weeks later on how they're doing. So, in order to make this happen, we need to send 30 of our staff members over to the NYA and the community center to make sure our students are adequately supervised. Our 2 assistant principals, who I've already enlisted in this task, our 2 school resource officers, who are very excited about this whole activity, and 2 secretaries, because we are going to have our students scanning in with their IDs. We have a computer system that works at our front door that is mobile, and it's going to go right over to the NYA and the community center, so we have adequate attendance of who is there. So this is just an oversight of the schedule that we put together to make this happen. It is 3-hour and 15-minute sessions, so a group of students, roughly 200, will have an hour and 15 minutes on the gym side of NYA, where they will do basketball, pickleball, board games, any type of other activities on that side. Then they'll move to the
turf side of NYA, for those of you who have been there before, where we will have the hypnotist. And then their third venue for the last hour and 15 minutes will be down at the community center. And we've set up kind of a three-way rotation where they can walk between those events supervised by the 10 teachers that are over there. We have already talked to All-Star Transportation to make sure that this works for them. And so what will happen is they will do the morning bus route, drop off at the middle school, drop off at the high school, and then head over to NYA. That's why you'll see it starting at 8:15, because we're not entirely sure. We do need to prioritize getting our juniors to the high school first so that they can start taking the test before we worry about what time we get our 9th and 10th graders to the NYA. We have arranged with Whitson's to have grab-and-go lunch brought over to NYA and Community Center, so before they load the buses at 12:30, they'll get a grab-and-go lunch, then the buses will swoop back through the high school, pick up our juniors who took the regular length of time SAT, and then move on with the rest of the route. You will note that our seniors will not be coming into school that day. They typically have not come in for our spring testing day. They do have a lot going on. We do use that day to encourage them to fill out their scholarship applications, of which they should be doing, and complete their capstone project. So while they don't have something structured going on, they do have something that certainly needs to be happening. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but the gist of this is that we have a crazy schedule, but we think it will work if we can get approval for a 2-hour early release on the 23rd.
Questions? Ms. Larkin?
Can I come?
Absolutely.
You definitely come. I think it sounds great. I mean, awesome. I vote yes.
Ms. Harriman?
I would ask to come too, but I wouldn't be allowed.
You're a shadow. Oh, you're
Yes.
no, you can't go.
Mr. Croissant?
So All-Star was good with the fact they have to add, it sounds like this is just for the high school, middle school, and the elementaries, and Reed are all full days. So All-Star didn't see any problem with us asking bus drivers to do an extra run that day.
No, he did not. And we do that also on conference days when we don't align with the middle school, the high school conferences, so we do that at other times in the year as well.
Yeah, and I know it adds a bit of a strain to the bus drivers when it happens, because it takes away a chunk of their time in the middle of the day and such, so.
Yeah, we did call and ask him before we put this into place to make sure that it was something that was feasible, and Helen didn't seem to think that it would be an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Further questions? Seeing none, all of those who approve the SAT dance, please say, raise your hand, say aye. It is unanimous. Thank you very much for being so creative. That brings us to our first read of policies. I'm going to be giving the chairship for a 5 minutes to Mr. Ramsey. We shouldn't have to do anything. We should all
So, turn control over to John to make it easier.
I like that. Okay, Mr. Croissant.
So we have brought 3 policies forward today. These are all policies that have been sitting in queue for a little while, but they were re-reviewed by the policy committee prior to bringing them back. The first one, policy 4000, concepts and roles of personnel, is basically the introduction policy to the 4000 series, which is our personnel series. So this is a pretty straightforward one. We made one change, I'm trying to work off memory, but we made one change to add the 6th bullet, but most of the rest of it is what we received from Kay. And I should mention that all 3 of these we did when we had discussions as part of the policy committee, both originally and during our re-review. Suzanne Durango was involved in as our director of HR, so she has seen these and made her suggestions as to what we needed in these to make sure they fit our practices and the way things, both our practices and our legal responsibilities at the school district. I'll start with the policy forecast. Any questions?
Any discussion or questions?
That's easy. So next up, we have policy 4100, which is a policy about certified personnel. Again, this is a really straightforward policy that Suzanne helped us with, as well as Dr. Crutchley. The language changes we made to this were to allow a little more flexibility in the superintendent's decision-making. The original policy was a lot more rigid and would require her to come to us a lot more often as changes were needed. We wanted to allow her, because we know that there are times where we need another teacher, especially over the summer. The class size suddenly goes above the limit and she has to hire another teacher. And it falls within the budget, so it doesn't really make sense to have her having to convene the board to make decisions. So we tried to open this up a bit to give our superintendent more flexibility to meet the needs of the district, while still making sure the board had proper oversight, which is going to have a huge impact.
Any discussion on the certified personnel? Okay, Mr. Curzon?
Maybe I don't have a copy. And the third one we brought forward was policy 4112.5/4212.5, which is employment and student teacher checks. This is one that it covers the types of checks that we do in the district when hiring someone. Hiring someone on the staff level, it does not include student employees. We went through this again with Suzanne and made sure that it met the current practice. The one, trying to see, we did have some discussion both times, both on the original read and on the subsequent read about the section that you'll see crossed out about credit checks. This was not something we were doing previously that we have been doing. There was some, if I recall correctly, legal chimed in and commented on not doing those. And we felt that they didn't really lend a lot to the majority of our situation, the majority of our employment situations. And most of the ones where it does apply, it's either in the contract or it's something we do anyway. So that's why we took it out of policy, because it was an undue burden we were going to perform it for every single person we hired. I think that's all I got.
Was there a conversation on all of the three previous? Is there any conversation on the third? Hearing none, we'll move on to the minutes at this point.
If there are any questions that come up on any of those three, if you could please get them to me by the beginning of next week, because we'll have a policy committee on Wednesday, so we can discuss them there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tucson. Okay, we have 5 minutes to approve, and are there any updates on any of the 5 that one would, just the number, please, because we need to figure out what our motions are going to be. So which date do you have updates
I'll
on?
have just the 18th and the 20th.
We've got updates on those two, and I have an update for February 1st, so why don't we take each of the motions individually, yes?
Move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of January 18th, 2022.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Larkin, seconded by Mr. Trusson. Discussion?
Just one small change, marking absent. But then you said I said things, so I don't natural that way. Okay.
So do we make a formal amendment to that, or just that? Very good. All in favor of approving the January 18th minutes?
Right? Move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of January 20th, 2022.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Larkin, seconded by Mr. Cruson. Discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes of January 20th? Unanimous?
Move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of January 25th, 2022.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Larkin, seconded by Mr. Cruson. Discussion? All in favor? Unanimous?
Move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of January 27th, 2022.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Larkin, seconded by Mr. Cruson. Discussion? All in favor?
Move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of February 1st, 2022.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Larkin, seconded by Mr. Cruson. I'd like to amend the minutes if that were possible. Is okay? I move that changes be made to the minutes related to Linda O'Sullivan, including changing the words, quote, refer to someone who spoke about discrimination of white males in college, end quote, to, quote, presented statistics and articles to the board in support of her assertion that there is no evidence of discrimination targeting white males, end quote. And changing the words, quote, noted that in corporate America, one can annually review the company's policy, end quote, to, quote, asserted that many American companies have embraced DEI policies, end quote. Is there a second to my amendment? Mr. Cruson seconds the amendment. Discussion. All in favor? Unanimous? That brings us to the correspondence report. Mr. Cruson.
Do we need to make a motion first? Do you want me to speak first, or do you want to make a motion?
Why don't we make the motion?
I know, I crossed them all out, I can find it.
Right at the top.
Do you want me to leave out the other thing? Did we already
Just say, yeah,
you
you can
did
say
that, right?
correspondence report.
Okay, so move that the Board of Education approve correspondence report.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Larkin, seconded by Mr. Cruson. Discussion.
So I'll start since I asked it, and I thank everyone for supporting moving this out for discussion. I really appreciate how hard this correspondence report was, Mr. Ramsey. I'm sorry to do this to you, but the first correspondence report was fine. I had no problem with it. I felt the second one was hard. It's hard to read. I am not comfortable with it going out as public. It was hard to read. It had some information in it that was more than we would normally have, because in some cases, portions of the emails got copied and pasted in, which as a board we've discussed previously, we're not supportive of revealing, and I know there were many concerns previously about having part or all of the email in there. And so for those reasons, I don't feel I can vote in favor of approving that particular correspondence report. I think it needs to be cleaned up a bit before it should be put out to the public as the official correspondence.
Well, okay, thank you very much. Now, is that something we can, clean up a little bit, next week, or, and approve that at the next meeting?
Yeah, I think we could, just take a little more time with it. I don't see any reason why, I don't know of any reason why a delay would not be that.
No, I really appreciate that feedback. The emails were so voluminous, I made an attempt to switch the format.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your feedback, and we'll clean that right up.
Yeah, and it was mostly, as I said, it was the readability and then the inclusion of some of the extra information, but I think it can be cleaned up.
Yeah, no, I think you're correct. Very good.
So I am going to make a motion to postpone the motion that is currently active brings us to public participation. Is there anyone on the phone who would like to speak to the board? Anyone on the floor who would like to speak to the board? Name and address, please.
My name is Mitch Felicity. I live at 3 Wiley Lane in Newtown. From a personal perspective, personal viewpoint, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody on the board for a very impressive and inclusive process that considers more than one point of view through decision making that went into today's marquee issue, shall we call it. I also serve as a state representative for most of Newtown, and as an elected public official, I compliment everybody here on the way all of the input was digested and the respectful process that took place. It's hard to separate the representative from the parent when I say thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from either the floor or the phone? Hearing and seeing none, public participation is now closed. Get this. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move that we adjourn.
Second. Third. Mr. Toussaint makes the motion, Ms. Harriman seconds it, and Ms. Larkin thirds it. All in favor? Unanimous.